Welcome to part 3, Nutnfancy, going through my current iteration of my level 2 first aid kit. I tongue-in-cheek call it a brigade level first aid kit, one that I use for group outings, and I stock it accordingly where I may have multiple emergencies. I try to make it both broad and also deep in its capabilities for the given size, for the given weight that I'm able to take. Again, this is not a level 3 kit, this is not a paramedic level, nor am I a trained doctor, nor am I a trained paramedic. However, I've treated lots of these types of emergencies like you've seen and that I've talked about. Hey, we left off talking about my labeling philosophy. Uh-oh, Nutnfancy, more philosophy. Yawn. Here it comes. The reason I label it is because you may not be using your first aid kit. You ever thought of that? You might be the one that's jacked up, and you might be able to just utter the words, first aid kit, that way. And the guy or gal that breaks into your first aid kit may not know too much about first aid. So if you say, hey, go get some 3x3-inch sponges and use them to stop the bleeding on this specific wound, I'm just using that as an example, maybe labeling is a smart thing. Again, I don't have everything labeled, but I'm trying to get to that level. It's helpful because people, your laymen that might be accessing the kit, that will help them out. And also if you can put little instructions on it, kind of like I did with that benzoine, that helps too. The kit may become separated from you as well, and it still may be needed. Therefore, labeling is good. The labels I use, here's attention to detail. Oh my gosh, Nutnfancy's talking about the labels. Yeah. I use these. You can use whatever you want. I just use these because they're bright, they're easy to see. I buy them at Walmart. Neon labels, yeah, they're just stick-ons. It's better. Don't think you can write, and here comes a lesson of experience, don't think you can just take your permanent marker and write on the plastic. That'll last for about a year and then it'll be rubbed off. It just doesn't last. You need to do this or something along those lines. Now, I was saying these are called sponges. A lot of guys will just call them gauze pads. So again, these are some 3x3-inch, and on the back side I have a Swift brand or a couple Swift brand. I think these are the Telfa style non-adherent bandages. Okay, now someone in the comments of level 1 adequately and I think accurately identified the problem with Telfa. If you don't know Telfa, and I don't want to burn one of these by opening it up. I think that's what this is a Telfa. Maybe I should have labeled it. The Telfa has kind of a non-adherent shiny side to both sides of the bandage. You've seen them in the stores before. And it does work pretty good if you have a wound that's not bleeding too much. However, if blood crosses over that non-adherent side and then goes into the cotton gauze side, it will kind of still form a bond, and it's not going to be non-adherent in that situation. In that case, the true adaptic is superior. Okay, so you see the difference. However, for a minor cut or minor laceration that isn't bleeding too much or has stopped bleeding, I like the option of still using these because they're self-contained. It's both gauze and non-adherent in one application. Put them both in the same baggie. And here we go with the smaller size tegaderms. Remember I told you about those? So here's the, what is this, 2 3/4 inch by 2 3/4 inch size. And that would be probably more applicable to that hand injury that I was using as an example. And I have put these on before. I just haven't used them in a wound situation. When I went to Stat Medical, we did a test one, and I put it on the hand, and I was pretty impressed with Tegaderm. Pretty impressed. That's a great size to have. If you were going to go with a size of Tegaderms, these are the two I'd recommend. I'd probably recommend having more of these than the 10 centimeter by 12 centimeter. There you go, Europeans. I actually used the metric system for you. Everyone's like, dude, why don't you use both sizes? Oh my gosh, I can't do metric and inches. It's too much. Okay, and then over here, I'll get to that one here in a sec. Steri-strips. Okay, you're going to see that I also have a suturing kit, and now I have included both in level 1, level 2 kits, Steri-strips. What these are, for you guys that don't know, and I know all my medical professionals are probably asleep by now, but you other people listening, if you're still awake, these are the way to easily, and I should say more easily, close a wound. Let's say I have a laceration, on my arm. To close the wound, again, I would stop the bleeding, I would clean it, I would make sure it's nice and clean with all the debris taken out of it. And then I could either stitch it up, which is actually a skilled activity, generally one to be done only by a trained medical professional, or you could use steri strips. And that basically they're just basically strips of tape that cross the wound site, and you're just pulling that skin back together, trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. You dig? And steri strips are a great way to do it. Couple cautions. It won't stick where there's blood, water, grease, or other things. You're going to have to clean the wound site so steri strips cling to the non-injured skin. That way you can actually actuate the wound closure. 2 different sizes. And yes, they're expensive. Amazingly expensive. This is a 1/2-inch variety. This is a 1/4-inch variety. Look how thin and small they are. Steri strips. If you don't have or want to spend money on steri strips, you can actually use that microspore first aid tape. You could cut that with your scissors, which we'll get to, and it will perform basically the same function. Been there, done it. When I didn't even knew there was such a thing as steri strips, that's what I did. And it worked just fine. Will it heal up as well as a medical professional having sewn it up? Probably not. Probably not, but it's better than dying or losing an arm or a leg. This brings us to the next compartment. What's this? Well, a lot of times in first aid kits, you will see an emergency blanket, kind of like this one. I bought this one years ago, and this is just a generic reflective Mylar space blanket or emergency blanket. Everybody knows what these are. There's your dimensions there. I'm not a big fan of the blanket. Have you ever tried to use one of these? I have, and it's nigh unto impossible to secure it in such a fashion where body heat does not escape. Doesn't happen, in my experience. It's really tough. You have to either break out the duct tape, tape it around the patient, in a first aid scenario. It's better than nothing, and it is still reflective of heat. However, you can still conduct heat if you're on a cold surface. So space blanket, everyone thinks it's a miraculous way to instantly produce body heat. It really isn't. It has limitations. Again, if you're on a cold surface, you need to get off of that cold surface. Even if you're completely wrapped in an emergency blanket and somehow miraculously with a blanket form factor you're able to seal it off so you don't have gusts of wind and body heat escaping, you're still going to conduct heat out of your body and into the cold surface. So you need to create an dead air space some way or another. Maybe some brush, maybe some clothing, sleeping bags ideally on top of a sleeping mattress. And this is what we'd be using for perhaps a shock victim, someone who's going into shock, someone who has dunked in some very cold water, which I've seen on some of my outings, and we had to get them warm very quickly. Why? Because we were in a snow environment. And it gets very serious very quickly when someone gets dunked in the cold water. Build a fire quickly, strip off that cold wet clothing, and get them warm quick. Especially if you're in a calorie-limited situation. Still talking about the blanket. I think a far superior choice than the blanket is what you see writing in here, and that is a micro space bag. Same type of concept. I'm not even going to take it out. You can see it. It's tight in there, isn't it? I mean, that's right in there, pretty much taking up all that room. But this is a sleeping bag, mini sleeping bag form factor. Here's the tag that came with it, and this is by Adventure Medical Kits. Again, I think they do some good stuff. This is one of their things, and you can see, oh, she looks so restful in that space bag, doesn't she? But it's a bag. It's not a blanket. So it's going to seal automatically. And this one it's only 3.8 ounces. You can see, I love their packaging. It's very nice. Shows what the percentage of reflectivity is and has a little stuff sack with it. This is an ideal first aid kit inclusion because with a shock victim or someone who's suffering from hypothermia, get them in the bag. Again, get them dry if you can. Get that cold clothing off of them. Get some calories in them if at all possible. If they're lucid and conscious and able to, maybe some warm drinks would be good, to warm up their inner core. And then get them in. If I have a regular bag, though, guys, I will tell you I'll use my regular sleeping bag. This is just if I don't have anything else, or it might be an addition. I might slip this over the top of a sleeping bag. Because what if I went out in a very temperate, and this is drawing upon my experience again, where I've gone out in a very temperate climate where we weren't expecting to go below maybe 40 degrees Fahrenheit that night. Therefore, our gear that we took with us was relatively lightweight. We didn't take very heavy sleeping bags. Lo and behold, someone gets dunked into very icy cold water because, what do you know, we're hiking near glaciers at the altitude we're at. They get freezing quickly, and all I have is a 40-degree bag. And if it's only a down sleeping bag that you have, then guess what? When it gets wet, its insulation properties go bye-bye. That's where this could come into play. Maybe I would use all the fleece that I have with me. Again, we got the victim warm, dry as possible, and then we'll wrap that fleece, creating that dead air space. We need dead air space to actually insulate and warm someone up, and they need to have their own heat generation, and then the space bag will go on the exterior of that bedding. Also, climb in there with them. I mean, I think this is big enough where if someone's life is at stake, no kidding. I mean, body on body, you know, nothing kinky here. We're talking about life-saving, guys. Get your body heat onto that victim and warm them up fast, and you might save their life in a lot of different situations. I highly recommend a bag over a blanket. That's the bottom line. Enough said on that. Hey, magnifying glass. That's included in Nutnfancy's Level 2 med kit. Why? Why do I have a magnifying glass? Experience, that's why. And no, it doesn't always come. If I'm extremely weight limited, then sometimes it gets left behind. But generally, it does ride in the kit. Also labeled, you can see that. It's because if you have a lot of slivers or glass or some type of foreign matter that is lodged in the skin, this can be a great way to identify it and find it and dig it out with the other tools that I'll show you coming up. Magnifying glass, generally to get slivers and other types of things under the skin. And if you've ever had a splinter deep and you're just, I mean, it looks like you got it out, man, how many times have I been there? And you're like, God, there's still something in there, you know, but you can't see anything with the naked eye. Magnifying glass. It's the bomb. Oh yeah, I see it. Now I know where I need to dig. Grit your teeth. Here I go. Going in. Been there. Done it. Duct tape. Always bring duct tape. This is where I'm going to throw some more POU at you guys. Don't confuse your first aid kit with a survival kit. Okay, and some guys, I don't even know if this will happen. I hope it doesn't. Don't say, oh, you know, you really got to have a signal mirror in there. Signal mirror. Or, you know, or you really have a fire starter in there. This is not a survival kit. This is a first aid kit, and that's its POU. Now, granted, we'll have a little bit of crossover. How's that for a juxtaposition hand motion? A little bit of crossover between the two concepts. Duct tape might be some of that crossover. I could use it for a number of things totally unrelated to first aid, no doubt. But along the lines of first aid, I found it to be indispensable for a variety of reasons. Remember, I talked about the blanket, maybe taping it together with duct tape. Maybe you need to keep a certain item in place. Duct tape. The way I use it, by the way, is I just take a hotel key or something like that, cut it to size, and wrap it. There's lots of different ways. Some guys will say, well, I like wrapping it around my water bottle, you know, and taking it with me on my water bottle. Just wrap duct tape around it. Well, again, my philosophy is with your first aid kit, it has to be self-contained. Don't scatter the items of your first aid kit through a number of different areas. Don't say, oh, crap, I thought my duct tape was with me. No, everything is in the kit. That way you have it when you need it. You don't have to go on a hunt. And I guarantee you, when you really need it, when you really need your first aid kit, you're going to be in a hurry. Again, voice of experience. Going into this compartment, Neosporin. Don't always carry a big tube, but I do now. And I do write a date on it. That's the date I acquired it. Granted, I know most of these have their own expiration date on it. This one expires 1 of 2010. Okay, remember part 1 in my med kit review talking about expiration dates. That we could get really bent out of shape saying, hey, you know, come January 2010, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this in the garbage and go buy some more. Another $5 tube of Neosporin. If you're made of money and you have a lot of time on your hands, I highly recommend that course of action. Great. Good on you. I have neither, so I'm going to let this ride a couple years. Now, if it gets ridiculous, I'll replace it. And I do tend to cycle through my materials. What I will actually do is take this one out and use it for home use, and then sub in a newer marked one for inclusion in the level 2 kit. With me? That's kind of how I work it. It's just a rotational. Ooh, this brings us to a very cool substance. Once again, if you guys forget, these little tubes I have are called transport tubes. I talked about them in my level 2 kit. Transport tubes are used in laboratories for, what do you know? Transporting things. Huh. Look in my description. I might annotate it where I get these. There are various places online where you can buy bulk transport tubes. Highly recommended. The reason we're going to use transport tubes for this particular substance is because, again, we are size and weight limited with the level 2 kit. If I was not size and weight limited, I would bring along the entire package of what this is. This is Burne Hydrogel. It is kind of an off-brand of the hydrogel concept used for treatment of burns. It is a very soothing gel material. You can see what's in it. I can't even pronounce what that is, so I'm not even going to attempt it. And what it does is it just mists it onto a burn site, and it cools it and helps it heal, is my understanding. I could be wrong on that. But hydrates, cools, and soothes. And what I did is squirted some in the transport tube. So now I have some hydrogel or burn treatment. No, this isn't like the end-all way to cure burns, but I have used it and stuffed other brands of this same type of concept with great success. The dude that got burned, namely hand in the campfire, grabbing a hot skillet and really seared his hand pretty good. I used this on it, and he dug it. He's like, oh man, that makes it feel so much better. So yeah, it's a nice thing to have along. Should I bring more? I just don't have room. Don't have room. So I just bring that amount. I really like to bring the whole thing, especially since it atomizes on contact. And itch relief. This is going to be dependent on where you live and what kind of critters and what kind of vegetation you run into. I myself, speaking from experience, have had some extremely bad poison oak before that I acquired in Northern California on a hiking expedition. Actually, it started to rain. The poison oak came completely through the long pants I was wearing and jacked my legs up in a major, major way. It was miserable. I had it for many weeks. I still wear some scars on my legs from it. So yeah, it's safe to say that I'm allergic to that Richwal, or however you say it, of that poison oak, poison ivy. This does help. This itch relief cream, again, for brigade level first aid kit where you have a large group, maybe you're hiking around, stuff like that. Not just vegetation, but maybe bee stings or something. And there's a number of other reasons why someone would like to have this itch relief cream. I've used this particular brand. It's just an off-brand I bought from Target, dated appropriately. You can see how old that is. Still using it, and I like it. Calamine Lotion. Some guys say, well, we'll have a transport tube of Calamine Lotion. I've done that before. It's just I go back and forth, and I think Calamine works pretty good too. It's old school, but it works. Needle. Have a needle in your level 2 first aid kit. Maybe even, I think I have one in my level 1 too. I think I showed you guys. And this is how I store my needle. I just take some card and just poke it through. Definitely don't want to throw it in there by itself. And don't put it in a plastic bag. I learned from experience, you put it in a plastic bag, one way or another, that needle's going to poke through and totally compromise the waterproofness of the bag. That's why you see it riding all by itself. Don't worry that it's not sterile at all. It's non-factor. I have ways to sterilize every instrument in the level 2 kit. You'll see that. Needle is very important for a number of reasons. I really don't need to go into them, do I? But it can help dig out that splinter and do a number of other tasks that are ill-suited for other tools. And that'll bring us to some other med tools that I use. How about tweezers? There's actually 2 types of tweezers I include in my level 2 kits, generally speaking. One is this one, and these are excellent. I have one in package here somewhere. I will attempt to find it for you. These are REI Super Sharp Tweezers. I've only seen them at REI. Maybe there's some other makers. Here's one in package. Great tweezers. I've used them for years. If you want a great way, let me put this against a flat surface so you can see. No, it's not the best choice. How about this? You can see how sharp those are. See the tip on those? That is something you can get in there and dig with. If you gotta dig, you gotta dig, dude. Suck it up, patient. I gotta get in there. I've gotta get it out. You know, I've done that. You gotta get in there. And that's a great tool to do it. But not always do you want super sharp tweezers. Sometimes you need to have some leverage on an item that's stuck in the patient. That's where I take these cosmetic tweezers, just cheesy lacrosse brand. These are only about $2. But look at the sharp, precision, flat grabbing surfaces that these lacrosse tweezers provide. And they're small, they're light, they're compact, and they come in their own carry pouch. Very handy to have, especially if you have to debride some tissue. And maybe, that's the best way you're going to grab on it and get rid of it. Yeah, it gets gross sometimes. You got to get the job done sometimes. There's no one else to do it. You're doing it. A couple tools to help you along. What's this? This is kind of long, the itch relief. This is an itch relief stick. A lot of different brands, a lot of different types. I have used these for bee stings, hornet stings, yellow jackets. It's been very helpful, and it's always proven its weight. We had an individual in our group that got attacked and stung multiple times by yellow jackets. This thing came out, and it made a world of difference for her comfort level. So, yeah, it's great. Oh, look, see, expired 1105. Still riding in the Nutnfancy Level 2 kit. Have no plans to replace it. I think it's fine. Maybe a couple years I will. Hey, what's that? Oh, this is something I just found. This is Neosporin spray. This is actually not, it's called Neo to Go. It's a portable container. I'll give it a shot so you can see what it's like. See, it just generates kind of a fine mist that goes on the wound. But it's not Neosporin-like. Don't be confused. It's more Bactine-like. That first aid spray Bactine? This is what this is. And it's so lightweight, so compact, and it does soothe the wound that I've included in the level 2. And it's antiseptic. Another way to disinfect the wound. Neo to Go. Very super not cheap though. I think that was like $4.50, $5 or something. Here's some iodine solution here. Another way that I can disinfect the wound, and it's in a tiny little bottle. This thing goes way back, so it's probably expired. Yep, I'm not even going to show you the expiration date. It's probably embarrassing. We just can't afford to rebuy it all the time. It's in there though. Chapstick. This kind of goes along into hygiene a little bit. And I know survival guys are saying, hey, you can use chapstick to start a fire with on cotton. I know. So that's another double way to use it, but in a first aid sense. It has some sunscreen in it, SPF 15, particularly with this version, and also just included because it's so lightweight, and it is a comfort item in the first aid kit, but I had room to include it, so here we go. Okay, remember I told you you might have some foreign objects, splinters or whatnot. I can't tell you how many times I've had splinters in and out of doors and I had to dig them. Now, a lot of you guys say, well, just use your knife, man. Why don't you just use your knife, break out the Kershaw Skyline. That just happens to be what I have on me right now. Get to digging. Well, again, like I say in a lot of my knife reviews, most of your wear and tear on your EDC blade, honestly, is going to take place right here at the tip of your knife. And you will realize that at the worst possible moment, and that moment will probably be when you need to use it as a surgical tool. Speaking from experience. You need to dig in and get something out. And you won't be able to because your tip's worn. This one's in good shape because this is a relatively new knife. Roger? That's why we're going to include a scalpel. A scalpel is a purpose-built surgical instrument. This one's taped closed, so I don't want to get into it. And yes, it's been opened. It's not a sterile scalpel because I've used it before. But I used it in a very minor fashion. You can see it in there. Well, let me pull this off so you can see it. There's the blade right there. See, have your EDC blade have a tip like that. Good luck. Razor sharp, great way to dig and debride tissue and get to things when you have to get to them. A scalpel is indispensable. And the reason I have this blade cover taped is because if you don't, it's going to slide down and it's going to be ineffective. So I put, there you go. Talking about duct tape, how useful it is. A little bit of that Gorilla brand duct tape on the scalpel. Always have a scalpel on your level 2. And what do you know? Riding in the back of this pouch is another scalpel. Remember the depth I'm talking about in its sterile packaging, which has not been opened. So if I were to get to a situation where, hey, you know what? I thought this was sharper. Got a new one to back it up. Break it out. See the wear and tear I'm talking about on the packaging as I've rolled up, restocked, and used the kit? They're going to bend around a little bit. However, it hasn't been compromised. Still intact. Now it takes us to, this brings us to my Hemostat. That's what this one is called. It is basically kind of like a locking pair of very precision mini sharp-nosed pliers with serrated jaws. Don't know if we can get that. I'll try to focus in on that. There you go. See that? And then it has a locking clamp on it that you can really ratchet down the force with it. Used in surgery on blood vessels to curtail bleeding. A hemostat. Also, they can use it during surgery to open up a wound. Maybe grasp the tissue and pull back on it to keep it open. It's gross, I know, but that's kind of what it's used for. Again, I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a doctor or medical professional, but I think I could probably use a hemostat if I needed to. Let me see. A good example of that might be Black Hawk Down, the movie. Remember when that guy had a bleeder deep inside and they're reaching in trying to find where he's losing blood? If they were able to locate it, they could have put a hemostat on it. I think that's what the medic was attempting to do. And that way the dude doesn't bleed to death. And maybe surgically you could repair that blood vessel and then remove the hemostat. So that's what I have it for. Not just that, but also it's just helpful for grasping things with it, locking jaws and very precise, pliers like that. A hemostat can be useful for a lot of different things. I'm putting it against a surgical pad so you can focus in on it. Otherwise, it's going to be blurred. Hemostat. I only have one. Now, some guys say, why don't you have a pair of them? You might need 2 or 3 for surgical purposes. And again, your level 2 may be called upon to do some things that might be a little bit outside your realm and the realm of your kit. However, I kind of like to include them. And here comes some more philosophy. Brace yourself. It might not be you doing the operation. You might have a medical professional in your midst that will be very grateful to have these kinds of tools available. In my experience, a lot of medical professionals do not carry first aid kits to this level, whether they're outdoors or whatnot. I don't know if they just get sick of it because that's their job. They don't have it. And so I've seen them where I've broken out my kit and they're like, dude, awesome. Yeah, I know how to use that. And it might be a situation that. Another reason I have hemostats. Dude, I'm already out of time. Part 3, Nutnfancy, level 2 first aid kit. Come on back. Part 4, hopefully I can wrap it up then. Talking about all the specifics and the POU that goes along with it. Thanks a lot for coming along. Appreciate it.
When I wake up in the morning light.